Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot more people on Zoom than we do in the room, so I'll probably stay right here behind the podium. But if you guys in the room have questions at any time, just let me know. My name's Jessica Reno. I'm a statistician. I work in the Division of Biostats and Epidemiology. I'm here on campus, right across the hallway there. So today I'm going to be talking about mostly an introduction to Excel functions, basically to make your life easier, which everybody always likes. I'm not going to talk about data analysis today, so nobody be scared. Excel really is something that I find useful to use for kind of project management, tracking data entry, any type of data entry that you do, whether it's to track your project and the processes, or if it's collecting data in the field, or if it's using other people's data that's available to you. Using functions to kind of show in real time what's going on with the data and answer questions that are important to you right at this moment, then it can be really useful to you. So before I jump into slides, I just wanted to show everybody a page from the workbook that I shared. This is an example of something that I call it a dashboard in Excel. And so imagine, as we all do, that you have a spreadsheet that looks something like this, where you're tracking patients, for example. And it could be anything, and you've got, your columns of data that you're tracking on each of these people or items, and that you want to be able to know at any point in time, how many people are in this data set, how many of them are over this age, how many of them, how many visits that have they had to our clinic, anything that you've answered that you just want to be able to have a real-time update on what's going on with that spreadsheet. A dashboard can be a separate tab in that workbook, or a separate workbook altogether in Excel that has functions that answer all of those questions, that every time you open it, it's going to update it immediately. So that's the goal today. Everybody here is going to be able to create this dashboard once we're done with this presentation. So we'll go through a few slides, and then I will start our interactive activity. All right. And if you want this presentation, let me know. I'm happy to share it. So we went over this a little bit already, but basically the reason that you use functions typically is to calculate something automatically. So something that you don't want to do over and over again in that spreadsheet or in other spreadsheets, we want to just calculate it automatically. We use functions for that. If we want to be able to summarize information quickly and on a regular basis, we can use functions. We can find important information without searching. So we're going to talk about conditional formatting today too, because that's really useful when you're using functions, not just, to summarize information, but also visually to tell us, where are these people that we're looking for. We can also avoid typos and calculation mistakes. That's a really big deal in terms of having clean data. If you can calculate something instead of manually entering it, we always do that. And then finally, being able to update summary information without recalculating it over and over again, we use functions for that as well. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to kind of help you with how to get started. So if you're already past this level, don't worry, we'll go into the spreadsheet and do some practice in a minute here. But if you're new to functions or haven't used them in a while, these are some really helpful starting steps. So, yeah, absolutely.
So I think doing the slideshow isn't showing up, so I'm just going through them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm just going to exit out of here. Okay. All right, I apologize to the people on Zoom. Okay, so for getting started with functions, What you're going to do is you've got your spreadsheet, use it to enter data, all that's great, but what if we want to enter a function into a cell? What you're going to do is you're going to go up to above where the spreadsheet is to the function box, and you'll see a little FX next to it. And then that's the function box where you're going to type your calculations, your functions. And the answers are going to appear in the cell where you clicked before going to that box. So make sure you kind of know where it's going and that it's, you've clicked where you want the answer to appear. So every time you set up a function, you're going to select the cell. Then you're going to enter an equal sign either in that box or you can just start typing. You enter your function. We'll talk about the details of that later. And then you press enter. That all sounds very easy. But just an important note here, if you click on other cells while you're typing a function, it will put those cells into your function and it gets very confusing very fast. So these 4 steps are actually very important to keep in mind. So what are we writing when we write a function? So we can use it like a calculator. So we can just 5 plus 6 like we've got down here in the bottom. We can say equals 5 plus 6. We're going to get 11. And we can use our subtraction, multiplication, division, exponents with all of these symbols that you see on the slide. And the important thing to know if you're just getting started with functions is that you can either enter that equals 5 plus 6 by yourself, or if 5 and 6 are in your spreadsheet, you can say equals A1 plus B1 here that have the 5 and 6 in them, and we can use the cell numbers instead. And that's really cool because if we decide it's not 5 and 6, it's 4 and 6, and the total is actually 10, it's going to update everything automatically for us. So we're going to use that information going forward to really kind of leverage the way that Excel does that to do some really powerful calculations. So now that we know the basic steps of writing a function, how do we go about actually getting the information that we want to appear in the cells? So when we go in and we click on the cell that we want the answer to appear in, and then we go up to our formulas tab in Excel, Excel can actually write a function for us. So we can go in not knowing, I don't know what this function is called, I don't know exactly where to start. We can actually say, hey, Excel, write this function for me. So we click on the formulas tab at the top, and then we click on insert function way over at the top left. And that's going to pop up a helpful box for us. And we can search for anything using keywords. So if we want to add something, we can search for add. If I want to put in today's date, I can enter today or date or whatever. And it's going to pop up a list of helpful suggestions for us and say, which is it one of these that you want? And so you can actually look through those and it'll pop up a description of each one until you find the right function. So once you find the one that you want, you can select that and hit OK and keep going, or maybe you want to read a little bit more about what that function actually does and how to use it before you get started, in which case there's a help on this function link that you can click on and it'll pop up this help file. That'll kind of help you get started and know exactly what you're doing with the function and what information you need. So that's one way to write a function. And it'll actually take you through all the steps too, because every function has different arguments that it needs to kind of carry out the calculation. And so it'll pop up a box next that tells you, we need this information and this information. For example, the first thing you want to sum together, the second thing you want to sum together. And it'll kind of take you through the steps of doing that. And so once you're done, you click OK, and it will have written the function for you at the top. So now you know exactly what the function is. It's stored in there. Everything's done. Second option you have when you're writing a function is you can write your own. Like if you know, like I know that you add things by using the sum function. I don't need Excel to help me out with that. In this case, you can go ahead and you can start typing equals sum, And everything will always be in parentheses. So after the name, you start your parentheses. And Excel continues to help you, even if you don't ask. So the great thing about this function box up here is that once you start typing, like as soon as you hit S, it'll pop up a bunch of possible functions it thinks that you're going to enter. One of them will be sum, and you can double click on that to go ahead and put it in there, or you can just keep typing it. You can totally ignore Excel's help if you want. That's totally fine. And then it will continue helping you and prompting you for what you need. So once you have the parentheses, it'll say, okay, now you need to enter your first range of things that you want to sum together, and you'll keep entering those things. And we'll go through this in several examples to kind of get the feel for it. But those are the two different options for writing your functions. And so I just want to kind of finish this up with inside the parentheses, you put the range of cells you want and follow the instructions. You always close it out with the parentheses. And one thing that we'll practice is highlighting ranges of boxes in the spreadsheet to put them into the function as well. And of course, when we're done, we hit enter. So we'll go over a couple more functions here in these slides that are really, really useful and will save you a ton of time. So one thing is dragging down and across. So let's say that we want to get the row totals for a bunch of boxes that we have in our spreadsheet. So here I have this made up data of 4 different groups that came in at 14 different times, and I want to add all of this together. So I want to get for time 1, 2, 3, etc. I want the total of people that came in. So I put in my sum function like we just talked about, so equals sum, and I put in the range of cells, and it gives me a total for that one row. But I want the total for every row, and so I grab this little box that's up there, but the little box at the corner of the cell with the function in it, and I just drag it down, and it applies that function to every row. If you want to know how to make it not change from one row to another, let me know because I can help you with that too. But typically we want to go, this row, that row, that row, that row. And then after that, we also want to have a column total in this box as well. So we do virtually the same thing, except that we grab the corner and we drag across. And it's going to apply the function that we wrote to every column. So now we have a row total and we have a column total. Okay, so let's talk about formatting for a minute, because when you use functions, that becomes pretty important pretty quickly. So like for when we're using dates or we're using percentages, that kind of thing, we want things to appear correctly. And sometimes when we calculate something, I don't want it to say 0.1, I want it to say 10%. So we format it. So in this case, we can highlight the cells or the column or the row or the whole spreadsheet, and we can right-click and go to Format Cells, and we have a whole bunch of different options here, and we can select the one that we want to be able to display it, and it'll stay that way in the spreadsheet once you save it. So the box that pops up when you do that is really helpful, and just keep in mind that there's going to be different options when you click something. For example, how many percentage points you want, where you want your decimal point, what type of date format you want, all those things. So, and then on top of that, you can also conditionally format cells. And typically what we're doing when we conditionally format cells is we're asking Excel to find cells for us that we think are important based on some kind of parameter and highlight them for us. And so what we can do is highlight the cells that we want to format. In this case, I have a bunch of different patients and whether or not their consent for a project has been completed. So I have either yes or no. So I've been going through and I've been enrolling people, and then I ask if they want to be in the project, and they say, and we do their consent, or no, they don't consent. So it's really, really important that I remember who didn't consent to be in the project, right? So I want to highlight those in red and make it really obvious this person has not been consented yet. So I highlight that column of yeses and nos, and I go up to the conditional formatting tab. So it's at the top. It's under the Home tab, so it's pretty convenient. Conditional formatting, and that's going to drop down a bunch of options for us. What do you want to make your formatting rule based off of? And it has highlight cell rules, and it has color scales. It has a bunch of different options in there, but the one that's most commonly used is the highlight cell rules. And then it pops up more options for you. Do you want to highlight cells that are between two values, less than a value, greater than a value? And the reason it's asking you this is because, again, Excel is writing a function for you. It's writing a function that identifies things that match a certain parameter based on what you want. And then it's going to highlight them in the format that you want them. So in this case, we want equal to. So we click on equal to, and it pops up a little box for us, and it says equal to what? And we type in no, and then we can tell it what color we want everything to be, the text color, the background color, all that good stuff. And once we've selected that we want red cell background with red font, we click OK, and then we've got our two no's highlighted, and they're very obvious, and it's very nice. Okay, so yes.
That formula live?
Good question. So I'm going to actually pull up Excel. I'm going to try and share it with everybody. So the question is, where does the formula live? And I'm going to go in here because I've made a conditional formatting row in this spreadsheet. When you click on conditional formatting, one thing you can do is you can go straight to the rules. Like if you want to write your own function from scratch, like you already know what you want to do, you can click new rule. You can also go to manage rules. That's going to bring up all of the rules that you've set up in this worksheet. And actually you can highlight a certain area that you want to look for rules in, but typically we're looking at all of them in the spreadsheet. And so here we have cell value equals no, and what range it applies to, what the format is. We can delete that rule if we don't want it anymore. We can create a new rule, or we can edit this rule, and it's all in here. So it's there's a lot of different options for conditionally formatting, so there's a lot of stuff going on right here. But you can change your format here to whatever you want. You can change your equals to, so that's what that is. Okay, so that was pretty much everything in the slides. And again, if anybody wants those slides, let me know. What we're going to do with the rest of the time today is we're going to go through our practice workbook. Do you have the workbook? So there's a Excel file on here. Oh, you can use that. Got it. Okay. So if you log into the Zoom meeting from your computer, it's in the chat. So we're going to go over this Excel workbook that has a practice in it. And we're going to practice making that dashboard that I showed you earlier. And just to kind of help, if you're trying to do this later on and you have the presentation and the workbook with you, I listed the functions that we use in the dashboard to put everything together. I don't believe in memorizing things, so it's always good to kind of be able to look stuff up. And Googling Excel functions is a really good idea. Sometimes there's a better one to use, and there's always going to be details on how to use it online. So they're all listed here, but we are going to go to our workbook. Oh, okay, great.
Jessica, someone just asked if you can break down by colors or just numbers.
Yeah, maybe ask more specifics. Okay, so this is kind of a two-part practice. So one thing we're going to practice is writing the functions to calculate things in the data collection spreadsheet that you have. And the other thing we're going to practice is filling in a dashboard that summarizes the information. So what I've set up here is a basically pretend project with a bunch of different patients, their ID, whether they've been enrolled, what their age is, their gender, their admission date and first visit date. And then here we're keeping track of the number of visits that they've had. And then we have their height in feet and inches. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I would actually like to see, now this person is 5'3". So that's the way the data is entered here, but I want their height that can be in one column. So total height in inches altogether. So to do that, instead of trying to add it up myself and enter it in, I'm going to write a function. And I'm going to zoom in so everybody can see better. Okay. Is that okay? Okay. So let's do a little bit of math. So let's just do an arithmetic equation here. If we wanted to calculate total height in inches, what would we do? Column H.
Click on the 5 and then divide by 12.
We are going to multiply this by 12 to get the number of inches. And Excel follows the PEMDAS rules, if anybody remembers those, but it doesn't hurt to throw in a few parentheses just to make sure. So I'm going to put some parentheses around the feet cell times 12, and then I'm going to add the inches. So now we've got feet times 12 plus the remaining inches, and when I hit enter, we can see that our 5 feet and 3 inches converts to 63 inches total. And now we're going to use our drag down. So the box in the corner is very, very small, but your cursor will turn into kind of a target here once you hover over it. And then you can click and then drag this all the way down to the last patient. That is going to calculate the number of inches for every single person in here. Wow, 6'11", that's really tall. Okay, great. So if you've got that down, then you're doing really well. We haven't used any of those function names yet. We're just using arithmetic, so that's pretty easy. The next thing we're going to do is now we want one column that has total height in feet. So what would I do now? Writing the one that we just made. Oh. Awesome. So 5.25. So now instead of 5 feet in one column and 3 inches in the other, we have 63 total inches, or 5.25. And you may notice that I've formatted this column to only have 2 decimal points instead of having a big long number with really small. So we drag that down. Now we've got that for everybody. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now we're going to start using some functions that can be really handy. So this is what I want to do now. I want to have a column that takes the date of admission and just gives me the month. So I just want to know the month that they were admitted, because later I'm just going to look at like monthly admission rates. And so instead of doing that manually, there is actually a function called month. And you'll see that Excel pops up its help for me, and it says returns the month, a number from 1 January to 12 December. So I know that I'm going to get a number, and then it's going to correspond. Now it says month parentheses serial number. That just means the date. So we go over here, we click on our admission date, close our parentheses, and we hit enter. So this first one returned 8, because this admission date is in August. So now we've got some easy monthly data here. We drag that one down. We've got the month of admission for everybody. So now what I want is the number of days between admission and first visit for every patient. So how would I do that? Yes, thank you. So this is something that might not be obvious right off the bat, but we can do arithmetic with dates. And typically what that's going to give us is the number of days. When we add or subtract, then it's going to give us a number of days as the result. So I go in here, equals, and then I can go over to, and notice how I'm clicking on cells instead of just entering F2 and E2. It's so much easier to just click on them, but you can absolutely do that too. You can, if you know the cell number, you can enter it in. Sometimes that's so we do our first visit date, because that's the bigger date number, and we subtract our admission date, and then we hit enter. 51 days between October 2nd and August 12th. That sounds right. And so now we drag that one down. And we've got a number of days. And that can be really useful, because maybe we want to make sure that, everybody's coming in relatively within maybe like a month of their admission date. We want to make sure they were coming in. So actually, if you wanted to highlight people that were coming in more than a month after, you could do that with your conditional formatting. You can summarize that information. So that's that. And then the last thing I'm going to do before I move over to the dashboard is, okay, let's say we have a question. How many people had more than 1 month between admission and first visit? So that's what we were just talking about. We can do conditional formatting. The other thing we can do is we can set up a function that returns yes or no based on whether or not they had more than 1 month between those 2 dates. So the function that we use is like a test for me. I have to try and remember what the functions are, but I'm going to cheat right now. Thank you.
So do you use a 31-day month for your
That is a really excellent question, and it is not an easy answer. So sometimes people will use 30.25 or 30 point something is like an average number of months. I typically use 30 because studies will use 30 often as their window. So that's usually what, if there's some kind of guideline like that, I'll use that. But unfortunately, you know, I think there are functions that will like detect whether it was exactly a month based on when the date was. But I don't remember what it was.
When you're doing calculations based on funding, you have to get a 30-day calendar month or one calendar month.
Right.
You need to know that extra day no matter what.
That's a really good point. So, so what I would do in that case is I would search for a Excel function in Google, and I would say, you know, what's a function that returns the real calendar months, and I would try and find something like that. In this case, I used 30 days, so I'm going to show you how to do that now. And then if you want to play around with the date functions, there's a bunch of them, and some of them are confusing and some of them are really helpful.
I'm sorry, can you use a greater or less?
Yes, so yeah, I'm going to recreate this here. So I'm going to use an if function here. So
Jessica, sorry, would you mind repeating what Robin said? Because
okay, so Robin was asking what if you need to know if there was a real month between two dates. And by real month, I mean it's March now. So if it's March, I want to know 31 days from now. But last month, I would have wanted to know 28 days from now. Is there a way to have it specific to the time period? And my answer is I'm not sure, but you can Google for that and try and find a function, or you could search in Microsoft's help page that we looked at earlier for date functions, and there are a bunch of them. Okay, thank you. So yeah, okay, so for now, we are going to pretend like all months have 30 days in them, and we're going to use an if statement. So, and what an if statement does is it says, Excel, test if this statement is true. If it's true, do this. If it's not, do that. So that's kind of the logic behind how this function is going to work. And the function is called if. So Excel says now you need a logic test. So I want to know if this number is greater than 30. Logic test. So days from admission to first visit, is it greater than 30? So then I put a comma to move to the next thing that I need, the next argument I need to enter. So Excel says now you need to tell me the value if it's true. Okay. If that column is greater than 30, then my answer to is it more than 1 month between admission and first visit is yes. Marks. And then a comma again, and the last thing I need to enter is the value if it's false. So if it's not greater than 30, then instead of yes, I want it to say no. Okay, and then I'm going to close my parentheses and press enter. So what we end up with in the first one is yes, because there's 51 days between admission and first visit. In the second one, it's no, because there's only 19 days. Let's drag that all the way down. Yeah.
That displays.
Yes, you can. And I believe that's a great segue into our practice. Yes, we're going to do some counting. So we will do that now in the dashboard practice. And there's a lot of different counting functions based on what you want to count and how you want to count it. So we'll do a few of them, but know that there are many, many functions So let's do some examples. The first thing I'm going to do on this dashboard, because this is often something that people doing project management want to see, is the date that this report was generated. And remember that every time you open this spreadsheet, it's going to update. If you enter more rows of data into here, then it's going to update as well. And so if you have the date up here and then maybe you want to save a PDF or save this as a table somewhere, then you'll know when that data was generated if you have the date on it. So how do we get Excel to give us today's date without actually entering it every time? This function is called today. You type today, and today doesn't need any arguments because today is always today. And so we open and close our parentheses, we hit enter, and we get Tuesday, March 5th, 2019. If you open this tomorrow, it'll say Wednesday, March 6th, 2019. So that's that one. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, of course, is know the total number of patients in our data set. That's going to be a count statement or a function. So, and notice how when I type in count, all these different functions come up in the help. There are a lot of them. So I just want count. Counts the number of cells in a range that contain numbers. That sounds like a good way to use my patient IDs. I'm going to go to my data. I'm going to go to my ID column. And I'm going to highlight the whole thing by clicking on the letter A above. And the reason that we do that instead of highlighting the specific range is because if we highlight the entire column, it's still only going to count the ones with numbers in it. But if we add records, it's going to keep updating the function. Okay, and I can keep editing my function in here, so I'll close the parentheses and hit enter. I'm going to zoom in so you can see this better. Okay, so we have 50 patients enrolled right now. If we enter another, it's automatically going to update to 51. Now I want to know how many patients are enrolled. So now I'm going to use, and this is similar to what you were asking me. I'm going to use count if. Counts the number of cells within a range that meet given condition. Sounds like a good way to use my enrolled column, which has yeses and nos. So I highlight column B by clicking on the B. And now I have my range in here. So I put a comma here, and then the criteria are that I want it to say yes. Yes in quotations, and close my parentheses. 46 of the patients are enrolled. And we have not highlighted those, but I'd really like to know who those people are because it's very important that I don't collect any additional data on them. So I'm going to conditionally format those patients by going to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, and selecting equal to. Okay, so if they're equal to no, and see how it does it automatically as soon as we start. If they're equal to no in the enrolled column, it will fill with red and have dark red text. I click OK, and now I can find them really easily. 1, 2, 3, you're not enrolled. We can also filter, and we can sort, and we can find those people that way too. But sometimes we want to just have them highlighted no matter what we're doing so that we always remember them. So, all right. Okay, so now I'm going to add another criteria to this. I want to know how many patients are entered into the data set who are enrolled and over the age of 55. Maybe those people answer different questions than the other people in the study. So I want to know how many there are. So this time we use ifs. So this is going to combine, not just combine the count and the if function, but it's going to allow us to select multiple criteria upon which we want it to filter. So our parentheses, and we need criteria range 1. So that means the first criteria you have, what column points to it. So the first criteria is that the patients be enrolled. So we go to our data and we select column B for enrolled. And so what's the criteria for that? And we want it to be equal to yes. Parentheses. And then next criteria range 2. So the other criteria was that they're over 55. So we go to the age column and we select that, and now we've got our second criteria range. The next thing we need is the criteria for that range, which is greater than 55. The tricky thing with this function that Excel might be able to help you with if you go through the wizard is that this part has to be in quotations, and that doesn't really make sense, but that's just how it is. So we put quotations greater than 55. And then we close our parentheses. And there are 8 patients who are enrolled who are also over the age of 55. So now we've gotten theirs. Last thing I want to do at the top here is I'm going to count the number of visits by enrolled patients. So we talked about the sum function, and what we could do if we just wanted to know how many visits there had been total, we could just sum this column. But there's also a sum if statement. So if I just want to know the sum of the visits for people who are enrolled, then we have to have a criteria being enrolled. And I have to use the sum if statement or function. I would say sum if. And the first thing it wants is the range for the criteria, not the sum. So number of visits by enrolled patients. So my criteria is enrollment. So the range and the criteria. The last thing it wants is the sum range. So what do you want Excel to sum if they're enrolled? You want the number of visits, which is column G. Close our parentheses and enter. So this is kind of our header for our dashboard. How many patients, how many are enrolled, any over 55, number of visits. So this will all be updated every time we open the document. And are there any questions at the moment? No? Okay. Everybody in here cool with all of that? Okay. So let's see. We've got about 15 minutes left. So I'm wondering at this point, I've got kind of the rest of this dashboard set up for being able to kind of enter different things. Summarizing age, height, and sex, summarizing the time between admission and first visit, how many people have been enrolled by month, and so we can keep going through this, but I just want to check in and see if there's anything that anybody here, or maybe even on Zoom, wants to go over specifically, or if there's any piece of this that's more important to you than others.
Can you show the count if function?
Yeah. So the count if function is what we used for the number of enrolled patients. So here I'll zoom in it's not really zooming this part. So I'm going to So this is the COUNTIF function, and this one's really useful and really easy to use once you get the hang of it. So basically you're asking Excel to count the number of times that something appears. And so this time we're counting in column B every time yes appears. And column B is the enrolled yes or no. So that means we're counting the number of patients who have been enrolled. So that's that function. And then if you go also to the answers tab and you click on any one of these, you'll be able to see the function appear at the top. So that's how that one works. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Well, then let's just keep going through. All right, so here's some basic functions that can be really helpful for summarizing data. So we've got age in that spreadsheet, so we want to know what's the average age. So I started typing in average. Oh, look, it's a function. That's convenient. So we open our parentheses, and it just wants to know, tell me the numbers you want an average of. So I'll go to my data, and I'll click on age, 41.56, and we can format that to be a round number if we want. I formatted it to 2 decimal points. And then median, we can get the median age as well in exactly the same way. And the median is 42. Oh, it's a pretty normal distribution. And then I also want to know what's the range in my study. Very important that we don't have anybody under 18 in the study, right? And so we go, let's see, I think returns the smallest number in a set of values. Okay, so we want the minimum first. Go to age, those are parentheses. Okay, the minimum's 20, that's good. And then the max, is 64. So now we've got our age ranges, our median, and our average. That'll be updated every time. You can do the same thing for height. I'll leave that for you guys to do on your own. Okay, let's do the number and percent of people who are male. So for the number of male patients, what function would we use? You can use COUNTIF. So that one's going to count the cells that match a certain criteria. So that'll be the same thing we did with the enrolled patients. It equals COUNTIF. And we go to the gender column, highlight it by clicking on the top of the column, and then we enter our criteria. It looks like M for male and F for female, so I'll put quotations M and then close my parentheses. 26 males. The same thing for female, equals COUNTIF. Highlight the gender column and quotations, close the parentheses, and 24. That adds up to 50, which is good because that's how many people we have, so we're not missing anybody yet. And then you can always add rows to this later if it doesn't add up to 50. If there are other categories that are being added as you go, you can add other rows for different options so that it does add up to 50. If you want Excel to create a table of all the different options for you, there is something called a pivot table. That is a whole other thing in Excel. I actually don't know them very well, but there are people who use them all the time. And it's, what's that? Some people think they're awesome. And they are really cool because you can filter and sort and get, pre-made tables and graphs and anything that you want by any criteria. And it is a very cool application. So if that's something that you want to do, I encourage you to look into it. And there's some good tutorials online, and there's some people here who know how to use them. So I just wanted to mention that as an aside. But in this case, we've got a pretty simple, straightforward data set, it looks like. So we have male and we have female, and we're going to say the percent. Okay, what would be the percent? It would be number of males, and then divided by the total, which we just happen to have up here. So we can click on that cell. Now we've got C24 divided by C6. That gives us 52%. That cell is already formatted to be a percent with 1 decimal place. Now I'm going to do the percent of females. So same thing, number of female per total. So I talked earlier about sometimes when you drag down, not wanting certain values to change as you go down. That's something that you could do here. So if I had dragged this down, I'm going to get the wrong answer because it's going to move down 1 row for each of the values that we entered into the function. That means that it goes from 26 to 24 and 50 to 46. So that's why our percentages now add to more than 100% because this one is wrong. So I'm just going to show you guys this real quick. I just learned this not that long ago, so I'm excited about it. But so when you drag down or across or whatever, and you don't want a certain value to change, you put a $sign in front of it. So the one that I don't want to change is C6. And you can either put the $sign in front of the column or the row, depending on which one you want to hold still. In this case, because I'm dragging down, I can just put a $sign in front of the row so that the row doesn't change. So in front of the 6, I'm going to put a $sign. And I'm going to drag it down, and now we get the right answer. So that's something you can do, like if you have a whole table where you want to get the percentage out of a total and you're using the total cell, you don't want that to change. So you can go in, you put your $sign and tell it to hold still while the other values change. And then you can drag it down and you'll get the correct answers. And in addition to that, I always recommend if you expect something to add up to 100, check that it does. So here, we say equals sum. We get 50, which we expect, and I drag this over to 2, and I get a 1, which is also 100%. And that's just a good check to do to make sure that your functions are behaving appropriately. So the last thing that I'm going to show you guys is, let's say that I wanted to know the number of people who were enrolled in January and then for each month. So I can kind of see, maybe I wanted to make a chart of like enrollment over a month. So here what I can do, I know that I have my month of, this is admission. So not completely accurate, but this is a fake project, so that's okay. So month of admission here, and whether they were enrolled. What did I do here? So this is a count if. Count if column L is equal to 1. What we're going to do there. I can drag this down, but it's going to stay the same, but I can change this to 2. Going down that way. And in that way, we can go down and see our each month. So that might also be a helpful table to have. And you might want to make a chart with this, like a linear chart. That would be really helpful to see kind of how things have changed over time, whether you've picked up enrollments on a monthly basis. And if charts is something you want to know more about, I'm doing another one of these noon workshops in May, I think the 21st, on using charts and graphs in Excel. And so look out for that if that's something you want to know more about. But I think I'm at the end of my time now.